Board of Education meeting. I'm Phil Pta, President. Would everyone please stand for the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Just a quick fire code announcement. Exits to the rear and to the side in the event of emergency. Okay. All right. We're going to move right on to our Islip Board of presentations, and we're going to start with our first budget workshop for this year. Val? You guys should stay here. Yeah, yes.
Can everybody hear me through this? Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight at the Islip School District's first 2023 district budget workshop. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Donna Brower. I'm the interim assistant superintendent for business, and it's been my pleasure to be here on the Islip School District and work with an amazing Board of Education and fine administrators and staff in the district. I'm here tonight to present to you our budget presentation. I think I'm going to pull this down just so you can hear me. It's a little hard to read. But the best way to start, I think, is by talking about the mission of the district. The Iceland Board of Education is in partnership with the community, and what their job is to empower all the students and make them achieve excellence so that they can reach their full potential. We want them eventually to become really successful and productive members of society. So with that thought in mind, I just ask you to keep that in mind as we prepare this presentation and we go through the whole budget cycle. So here we have our students making a difference. And as you've all heard in many of the presentations that Dr. O'Hara has made, he talks about putting students first, having pure intentions, and best efforts. And I believe that's true, and with every time you do that, we see a lot of success come from that. So as we begin this budget cycle, I'm just sharing with you our updated budget workshop schedule. Tonight we're going to be talking about state aid and the tax levy. On March 8th, we're going to be going over programs, initiatives, and expenditures. On March 22nd, we're going to talk about enrollment trends and staffing. And on April 12th, we're going to propose a final budget and ask the board to adopt it. And don't forget, on March 17th, we're going to ask, on May 17th, we're going to ask the community to come out and vote for our budget. Okay. So I want to take you through the budget process so that you can understand what we do. We have a huge staff in the business office that works tirelessly year-round, along with the administrators and all the building leadership to get the cycle done and to keep things moving smoothly. So this is what our calendar kind of looks like. We start in July, where we're pretty much wrapping up the final year. We go through and we get ready for all our fiscal audits, and we have to implement the new budget that was accepted in May. We roll into September with the beginning of school and purchasing to get the products that the buildings need. And we have a lot of state reporting that needs to be done for the previous year. We have to evaluate our budgets, and we have to share with the community and our staff what we need from them to keep moving forward, and, you know, to make sure that we have the right items in the classrooms for all of our students. During November and December, you'll see that we do a lot of budget review, and we start building a budget for next year by looking at the trends of what's being spent and what's being estimated. We roll into January and February, and we're presented with some state aid projections, and we start building a preliminary budget based upon revenues that are anticipated. We gather proposed expenditure data from each of our departments, and we start to work to really put it together. It's basically a puzzle, and we really try to put all the pieces in to make it work. In addition, we have to constantly keep looking at our enrollment, because that changes and fluctuates, as you know, during the year. We move into February, March, and April, and that's the height of budget season. We're continuing to build our budget. We're getting our state aid and our federal aid information disseminated to us. We're starting to understand what's being proposed. We start to hold our public meetings. We ask for community input, and we try to finalize our spending plan. We speak and work with the Board of Education to determine a tax levy that is comfortable for the community, but yet it still supports and maintains the integrity of all of our programs. May comes and we have our budget hearing. We also put out a 6-day notice to alert the community of the proposed budgets, and we hold our budget vote. After the budget vote, we're busy wrapping up the school year, making sure that everything that the district has needed and implemented and asked for in the previous year is realized, and we're starting to prepare now for year-end close. And I can tell you that year-end close, they joke and say that June 30th is the longest day of the year because it could last for 2 months. So, you know, the month of June is very, very busy. And everybody thinks, you know, during July and August we don't have much to do. That's probably our busiest time, reconciling and preparing for the students to come back in September. So it's a long cycle, and it's constant. And if anybody has, you know, any questions, I will entertain everything at the end of my presentation. But I hope you can understand what a complex process it is that we go through to make sure that our students are receiving everything that they need. So I put together some pieces that I think are really important for a balanced budget. And these are components that you should really always consider when making and developing a budget. You want to make sure that you continue to strengthen the district's commitment to provide students with additional opportunities, not only in academics, but athletics, arts, and extracurricular. We have to strive to always be fiscally responsible and build a budget that really supports the district's missions and goals. And probably the most important thing is to make sure that we do it in a way that it is sustainable throughout the years, so that we maintain a consistency within the community, so that you do not have ups and downs with your tax levies. So some sound fiscal management ideas are that we like to operate with transparency and accountability. We always try to have a routine analysis of all the budget codes and see what's going on throughout the year so that we can maintain efficiency. We have to continuously monitor New York State and federal funding requirements and reporting guidelines. We have to access innovative and cost-saving solutions. We have to find cheaper ways to do things. We have to research and identify new revenue streams for the district. That's really important as we move forward, because with the uncertainty of so many things that we're dealing with the pandemic, we have to constantly keep looking for new ways that we can increase our revenue. And an important thing is to establish reserves, not only for capital and repairs, but in a way that they can support the district throughout emergencies and any unforeseen circumstances. And we have to do all of that during the year and strive to have a clean audit report. We work with our auditors all year long, and they come in and they review everything that we do. So there should not be any surprises, and we just maintain that we have clean audit reports. Islip has been, in the past, fabulous with their audit reports. I invite you all to come when our auditors present our final audit, which has already taken place, but I encourage you in the coming years to do so. So some budget goals that we have: we want to commit to delivering high-quality education to the students. We also want to enhance our technology within the district so that our students are prepared for the world that they're going to be entering beyond K-12. We need to create a budget that's aligned with all of the district's missions and goals, and we have to carefully review each year's expenditures and identify areas that need some realignment. We develop long-term plans for the district's educational programs, but we maintain safety and security. That's our #1 priority, the safety and security of our entire educational community. We have to advance educational opportunities. We have to identify and continuously maintain, repair, and upgrade our facilities and our infrastructure here in the district. And we have to, as I mentioned earlier, research and really take care of our capital reserves and repair reserves. If we don't have them, we have to find ways to establish them. So when you're building a budget, you have to understand the needs of the district, and there's a lot of different components that we look at. We look at the instructional programs, the general support to those programs, our infrastructure, transportation, our salaries, benefits, and our debt service. And we also have to understand how the means that we need to fund them. So the revenue streams that the district has currently are our property tax levy and the STAR reimbursements, our state aid, our local revenues, our fund balance, if the board decides to use some of that, and that will equal our spending plan. So if you look at this graph, this is basically what it looks like for this current year. We have a budget of $88,712,247. And of that, our tax levy, you can see, is 71% of the pie. The state aid contributes to 27%, which the two of them together, there's your 98%. We have local revenues that are just a little under 1% and some fund balance, and that's the other 1%. So that's what's made up of our revenues, and that's how we pay for our expenditures. So as people are aware, the tax levy comes from the homeowners and the community members, and we put out a levy that we feel is fair to continuously maintain the integrity and support of all the programs that the district offers. The STAR reimbursement is something that is offered to eligible homeowners that offers some type of relief. The district then is in turn reimbursed for whatever percentage of the relief is given to the homeowners, so that we are actually made whole then for our tax levy. So how do we get to our tax levy? This is the complicated formula that the Office of the State Comptroller shares with us. It's made up of 8 different factors, and I'm going to show you what it looks like for Iceland. So it brings in our tax levy from the previous year, our tax-based growth factor, what we receive in pilots, which are payments in lieu of taxes, the tax levy exclusions that we have for our capital and our debt service, and then the allowable levy growth factor that, again, is given to us by the Office of the State Comptroller. What our anticipated year's pilots are additional additions for the coming year, and then you arrive at your allowable tax levy. So according to this calculation, this would be the allowable levy that the district would be able to go out for next year. It's $63,435,958. Now keep in mind that even though the law states that the 2% is tax cap, that doesn't mean it's technically 2%. So this calculation here will show you that the levy to levy increase is actually 2.12%. And that's what we are legally allowed to go to, should the board choose to. I know it's confusing, and it does, when you look at it in this manner, I hope it makes a little bit of sense, but if anybody has any questions after, I'm happy to talk to you about it. The other part of our revenue stream is our state aid. So the governor released on January 18th her executive proposal, and our district is slotted right now, according to her proposal, to receive $25,132,920. All of this now has to pass through the legislature, but for budgeting purposes, this is our starting point. Typically, when it reaches the legislature, the numbers we have seen increases, but we don't know because the governor was generous in this budget. We don't know that will be the case this year. So for Iceland, that's a change in 6.6% of the total state aid. And it's a change in our foundation aid, which is our aid that is per pupil of 10.81%. Again, all of this has to pass through the legislature by April 1st, and then it will be out in the new state aid ordinance that will be shared with the district and the board. And those are public knowledge, so anybody can look and see those as well. So as I talked about local revenues, we have local revenues that we charge for tuition from other districts, rental property, renting out some of our facilities, and we also can do an interfund transfer from debt service on premiums that we've received for bonds before, but that has to go back to pay for our actual capital bonds that are out. We have our pilot payments, and we receive that information from the town. This year, it was given to us, and they're estimating $285,000 coming back to us, and we can use a fund balance, and that's being estimated at $1 million, which is what was done last year. So these are preliminary numbers, and as we work through the budget process, we'll see where the numbers can fluctuate. So as I mentioned, this is our tax levy limit that we can go to, the 64 million. We add in our state aid, some of our local revenues, use some of our fund balance, and you look at a budget of $91,504,354. So what do? At this point now, we have to evaluate the rest of our revenues or anticipated revenues. We have to continue to search for new revenue streams. We have to analyze the contractual obligations that the district has and make sure that we're budgeted properly for those. We have to examine staffing needs for all our programs, look at new initiatives, and we have to collaborate with all of our district and building leadership to refine the initial budget requests that have been sent to me by each department. And we have to continue to monitor the New York State funding initiatives and identify ways to offset any general fund expenses. I'd like to thank everybody for listening, and I hope nobody fell asleep. And I'd like to invite you to come to our next budget workshop on March 8th at our next Board of Education meeting. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Sure.
I wrote down several questions, but the last one, 97 million, is that what you said this budget's gonna be 97? 91?
No, 91. That's
Oh.
where we're legally, where we can go to, based upon the tax levy that we're allowed to go to,
Right.
the 64 million, and that's based upon the state aid that is proposed for Islip, as well as an estimate on the local revenues and the use of some fund balance.
And what was last year's, 21, 22? What was that budget?
Budget was 88 million,
So,
712, 247.
So where was the expenditures? Where, can you explain where we came from 88 to 91?
No, we didn't come to this yet. What I'm saying is we can go to this with the estimates that we have.
But that's at 2%. I mean, that's at 2.12?
2.12 is where we're legally allowed to go
What if it
to.
was 2%?
2%, you're looking at probably about $80,000 less.
Right, so that's not much more.
Right.
So where's those expenditures, 81, 87 to 91? The $3 million?
Well, we have contractual obligations, and that's probably, the majority.
Well, I'm sure that's what people are gonna be asking, why-
Correct, so we're gonna be talking about, at our next meeting, we're gonna be talking about the expenditures.
And what about the state aid that was given to us?
Which state?
The-
Are you talking about the federal funding?
Yes,
So the federal funding does not play into your budget. That's separate and aside, and that's used for a one-time funding, because we can't count on that money to be here for next year. So those will be purchases that the district will incur so that we can supplement things that we're doing. But we can't utilize those funds within our general fund budget.
okay. I have
Sure,
quite a few, but I'm sure everybody else does too.
John, I have a question.
Sure.
Do I have to stand up?
No, that's okay, we can hear you.
The fund balance, I've never seen that in a projected, budget in terms of, utilizing it as revenue. Where do we stand right now with the current fund balance? How much is it funded? And if we did use the 1 million, allocated there, what % would we be at, and would that be sufficient to our, auditors?
So I don't have those specific numbers, and I don't want to give you numbers that I don't have specifics to, but I can get those numbers for you. I can tell you this was budgeted for last year to use $1 million. And that is, it really is, it's very common that districts use some of their fund balance that was not used in the prior year to offset the tax levy.
That's the only thing you can use it, and that's the only way you can use a fund balance, is to offset taxes, correct? You can't use that money for anything else.
It depends. If you have an emergency, the board can move to increase a budget and use some of that fund balance in an emergency.
So with this 1 million projected from the fund balance, we're still at 2.12?
That's correct. The 2.12 is the tax levy limit, so that's 64. Let's go back. So that 2.12 number is based on the tax levy limit calculation. So that's what we can have as the tax levy limit. We can't go above that, otherwise you would have to get a majority vote. So you factor in your revenues. So when you factor in your revenues, and we're using the state aid number that the governor gave us, And then some of our local revenues that are anticipated, and again, there you see it says estimated. That's what we're estimating, that's where we're coming up with that 1 million. The board could choose not to use any fund balance, and then your budget would then be down to, 90,504,354.
Would you know how much was put into the fund balance last year from our budget? And if we were to take $1 million out now, what went into last year?
Sure, we had 4% last year. That's the limit that you can have is 4%. So off the top of my head, I don't have that number, but it was 4%. I think it was somewhere around $4 million, a little under $4 million.
Ms. Brower, can you just explain to the community the difference between restricted fund balance and unrestricted fund balance?
Sure, so the unrestricted fund balance can be used to offset the tax levy limit. Restricted fund balance, something for TRS or ERS or FLR, employee liabilities, can be used only to offset those costs. They're specific and there's guidelines as far as percentages that can be used.
So when you're referring to the fund balance here, you're referring to the unrestricted, not the restricted?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll talk more about expenditures as we start to put together all of the requests that have come in. I'll be sitting with Dr. O'Hara to go over each and every budget line item so that we can then share with the board, our findings.
And one of, in prior years, one of the comments that has been made would be to provide the community with an update when it came to the expenditures and how much has been expedited or expenditured during the current budget year, and provide almost like a comparison to compare the 2021-22 budget to the 2022-2023. So maybe providing the community with that information would also be helpful.
So since we're in the 21-22 school budget, I will tell you that it's fluid. It's changing every day. So I could give you expenditures today, and tomorrow it can be changed. We just had our claims auditor here processing bills, so it could change. I could tell you exactly the year prior, and in our audit reports that are posted on the website, anybody can look at them. It will show you what was expended in the 2021 school year and what the budget was. It's in detail. Okay, if there's no more questions, oh, sure.
Do you guys anticipate needing the entire increase of 2%?
That will be a board decision and a superintendent's decision based upon when we look at what the budget requests came in at. We have to see where we are contractually with our salaries, our benefits, our debt service. And then once that piece is filled in, then we can see how much we can spend on the other items. And that's how you make the budget. But we will be sharing all of that as we go along, so everybody will be updated on those discussions. If anybody has any other questions after here, please feel free to contact the business office. I'm happy to speak to you. Contact Dr. O'Hara. We could set up a meeting. And I thank you for your time, and I look forward to working on the budget with you to make sure that it's fiscally responsible and respectful to the taxpayers of Iceland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brower, for that. Next item is the policy review, Mr. Corain.
Sure. So on the board agenda this evening is the second read of two policies. The first is the opioid overdose prevention policy. This is a new policy that's being recommended to the Board of Education for adoption. The policy will be on the agenda of the next board meeting for the board's recommendation of adoption. In essence, this policy states that the district will operate as a state health department registered opioid overdose prevention program. The following program is used for the opioid antagonists on students or staff suspected of having opioid overdoses, whether or not they have any previous history of the overdose. And this really provides approval from the Department of Health for these purposes regarding these opioid overdose prevention measures. Again, thank you to Dr. O'Callahan and her office for providing this information. And anybody who has any particular questions on the policy is either on the district website and can also be found on board docs. The next policy that's on a second read this evening is the Parents' Bill of Rights for Student Data Privacy and Security. Again, this was on the agenda of our last board meeting and is up for recommended adoption at the next one. So essentially, this policy delves into the district's measures to safeguard our students and staff's personally identifiable information when it comes to the educational records that we use here in the district. The policy underscores really the parents' rights and the guardian's rights regarding PII and the measures that the district and our third-party vendors undertake in order to protect this important information. And again, this policy can be found on the district website and can also be found on board docs. And then there is one policy up for adoption this evening. This is the voter registration for students. And this is an effort to promote voter registration. The Board of Education in the policy is directing the superintendent of schools to provide students with the registration documents in order to register. These are then provided to the student to bring home where they can work on the form privately in their own home and with their parents. And once the registration document is completed, that can then be forwarded over to the, in our instance, the Suffolk County Board of Elections, where the County Board of Elections will verify whether or not that student is permitted to be enrolled as a voter. This is stipulated at the end of the policy. There will be no requirement for students to accept the registration document, and there's no penalty, whether that's participation grades or credits for declining to take the registration form. And as we've stated before, if there are any comments, questions, or concerns about these policies, please address them during the public comment questions on the agenda. And any other comments can be sent to the district clerk and then forwarded to the Board of Education. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Kareem. We're now going to move on to our questions on our agenda items, and I'm going to actually read our policy. It's 12:30, public participation at board meetings. This will also apply at our public portion of our meeting, and I'm going to read you this whole policy. The Board of Education encourages public participation on school-related matters at board meetings, as outlined in this policy. To allow for public participation, a period not to exceed 30 minutes shall be set aside during the first part of each board meeting for public comment, with priority given to comments on the items on the meeting's agenda. A 30-second time period will be set aside at the end of each board meeting for public comment on matters pertaining to the district, but not on the agenda. These periods may be extended by a majority vote of the board. If possible, persons wishing to address the board shall advise the district clerk, preferably in writing, within a reasonable time period prior to the start of the public comment period of the meeting. The request shall be made in writing on a form provided by the district to maintain a first-come, first-served process. The district may request the name of the speaker. For purposes of following up with the speaker later, the district may request the speaker's address, telephone number, or email address. To limit comments to matters which may be properly discussed in public sessions, the district shall request a brief description of the topic to be addressed. Any group or organization wishing to address the board must identify a single spokesperson. Presentation should be brief as possible. No speaker will be permitted to speak for longer than 3 minutes. Speakers may comment, 1, any matter related to district business, any agenda item, matters related to agenda items specifically, or district matters generally, depending on the public participation section. The board will not permit, in public sessions, discussions involving individual district personnel or students. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments and/or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. All speakers are to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. Persons making presentations at a board meeting will address remarks to the president and may direct questions or comments to board members or other district officials only upon the approval of the board president. Members and superintendent shall have the privilege of asking questions of any person who addresses the board. Questions and comments from the public concerning matters that are not on the agenda will be taken under consideration and referred to the superintendent for appropriate action. Persons wishing to have matters included on the agenda shall contact the superintendent in accordance with policy 2342, agenda preparation and dissemination. The president shall be responsible for orderly conduct of the meeting and shall rule on such matters as the time to be allowed for public discussion and the appropriateness of the subject being presented. As outlined in the policy, any applicable provisions of the law and regulation and subject to the board's parliamentary procedure, the president shall have the right to discontinue any presentation that violates this policy. Folks, I just wanted to read this. I don't know who, if everyone's really saw our policy, but I just think it's important that everyone's aware that we have this policy. It's on our website. When we move on to our agenda items and our public questions, if anyone has any questions, raise your hand, name, address, come to either microphone, say your statement to the board. If we can get that question answered to you, we'll get that out to you as soon as possible. I just wanted to just make sure everyone, I don't know if everyone's aware of the policy. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on right now to our agenda items. Is there any questions from the Board of Education on our agenda items? Okay. Are there any questions from the public on our agenda items?
There were no agenda items in the front, so I wasn't able to get any.
Excuse me?
There was no pamphlet, the agenda items up front, so I don't know what's on the agenda.
I thought they were in the bag, but it's been a rough existence without carrying it.
Oh.
They're in the, would you like me to go get them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Folks, that's my mistake, I'm sorry, our clerk is not here tonight, and I thought I had given the packet up front. Circle back a little bit.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll,
Can I ask you a question?
sure.
It's on the agenda.
If it's on the agenda.
I don't know what's the agenda.
Well,
It was in regards to the opioid overdose policy.
Yeah, that's on the agenda. Yep.
yeah, that's amazing.
Matt, you had said that we were going to adopt that program as somebody had advised us to. Who was the person that advised to do that?
So not that it was somebody that was advising us. So the school boards throughout New York State receive guidance from the New York State School Boards Association. And Dr. O'Callahan might be able to speak to this a little more. NISBA. So they provided policy updates regarding legislation or any recommendations from either state or federal departments. And this was included in one of the recommendations. And based off of Dr. O'Callahan's staff and her recommendations, it was recommended that the board adopt this policy.
Mr. Brown, this, I'm sorry, I thought you were done, I'm sorry.
I am. And maybe Dr. O'Hara or Dr. O'Callahan would like to
This,
speak more to it.
This policy enables the school district to provide training to school employees to administer Narcan
Good.
if a person is experiencing an overdose.
Okay. violence? 'Cause,
Yes.
Matthew had said earlier that even if people that had showed signs that may not have experienced an overdose in the past may be, right, you just said that?
Yeah.
So how would you signal, how would you identify people
Well,
like that?
so that's part of the training, is what are the signs or symptoms of an opioid overdose? And then a person would have to make a decision to administer Narcan.
And it's all volunteer-based. So if you want to be a volunteer responder is what they call them. Anybody in the district, any employee, you would take a 30-minute training, and then you would meet with one of our health nurses, and they would demonstrate how to use Narcan. And then they would be our volunteer responders that would act if we had a visitor that came to, say, one of our school events, if it was an employee, it could be anybody who may be showing signs of overdose.
Sounds like a good thing.
Yeah.
But I did want to know who was recommending it, only because, you know, for all of my adult life, people throughout our entire community have passed away from opioids,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That's actually the real pandemic. I'm sure you guys know that, especially the doctor, ages 18 to 65, the number one leading cause of death was opioids, fentanyl,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to know who's it coming from, because for all of my adult life, it was this medical system that surrounds us that prescribed those pills and got people addicted, so that's my concern.
Yeah. And we're working directly with our school district physician, Dr. Don Kelly. So I serve as the program director, and Dr. Don Kelly is the clinical director. And we oversee the program.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Has everyone had the opportunity to, I know it's not much time, but to look over the agenda if they have any questions on any of our agenda items?
Did you have any extra?
I can hardly read.
Just let me know, folks, if you need a little bit more time. I'm not here to rush anyone, but also, in the future, our agenda's posted on the website, so you can actually glean that too, prior to the meeting. Okay, all right. Everyone good? Any questions from the public on our agenda items? Okay. All right, with that, I'd like to get a motion for consent agenda items 5A through 5R.
So moved.
That's Mr. Buell. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
That's Mr. Leggio. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, those motions carried out. Mrs. Fitzgerald, would you go over the personnel schedule, please?
This evening on the A1, we have a leave replacement at the secondary level, that's an extension, a long-term substitute in school counseling, permanent sub-teacher appointments in Sherwood Wing, and sub-teacher for the district. The A2, we have some resignations, a permanent sub and a long-term sub, and another long-term sub rescinded. The A7 is a coaching assignment for JV boys tennis. The A5 is X-schedule activities. We had a name change on one of our clubs from Excel to Good Vibes. And we have X-schedule advisors, the art director and middle school drama club and theater technology club. The 813 is additional duties. We have extra coverage at the high school. We also have extra duties for our STEAM program and our science Olympiad competition. The D1 is non-instructional appointments. We have a senior office assistant appointment, an office assistant part-time appointment, teacher assistant at Wing, and another instructional aide at Wing, also a sub-monitor for the district. B2 is the retirement of a cook at the high school. The B3, leave of absence request, security at the middle school, as well as a monitor at Sherwood.
On the personnel schedule, Mr. Joe read off, item B2, number 14, was a retirement of the high school cook. And Mr. Austin, do you have a few words you'd like to say?
Tonight it is with sad regret that this board has accepted Marie Galizzi's retirement. Marie has been a cook for many years in our schools, lastly the high school. She has been involved in many school activities and stayed involved long after having no children in our schools. Marie would often jump in and help where there was a need. Most notably, she was very active in the Islip Booster Club and was a major force with our post-prom committee. This was a lady who bled purple. Marie, you will be missed. We wish you much success, enjoyment, peace, and happiness in your retirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Austin, for reading that, those kind words. And Marie, enjoy your retirement. You'll be missed, echoing what Mr. Austin said. Okay, now we're going to move on to our public questions. Again, if there's any questions for the Board of Education on our public items, I'd ask that you just, one at a time, raise your hand, name and address, and use one of these microphones, and hopefully we'll be able to get any of these questions out to you.
Can I? My name is Tamara Bajrami. I live at 84 Movie Avenue. Please be advised, the Islip School District Board of Education has been advised by the community at large that mandates imposed under New York 10 and YCRR 2.60 were illegal. Through both open public meetings and email communications, you have been called upon to listen to the taxpayers of this district and remedy the improper regulations. Not once have you listened to this community. Instead, you have intentionally engaged in deliberate indifference to the federal and constitutional and statutory rights of others, resulting in a hostile environment. Not only are you violating the United States Constitution, the New York State Constitution, and multiple state laws, your teachers and staff are practicing medicine without a lesson. The New York State Education Law, Article 31, titled Medicine, states, the practice of the profession of medicine is defined as diagnosing, treating, operating, or prescribing for any human disease, pain, injury, deformity, or physical condition. Therefore, also violating New York Office of Profession Codes. In addition, we have advised you that Board of Education members are not immune to personal liability under Civil Rights Section 1983 actions. Despite our pleading at a recent Board of Ed meeting to correct these violations, the Board of Ed members and the superintendent, along with the advisement of the district contracted law firm, continue to implement widespread practices of school officials and employees, which, although not authorized by adopted policy, became common and well settled as to constitute a custom that fairly represents district policy. Customs including forced and coerced masking of students, isolation, segregation, forced and coerced testing, quarantine, verbal and nonverbal cues to students to adjust their mask wearing, depriving them of learning a previously enjoyed right until the students now comply. Governor Cuomo's state disaster emergency powers were rescinded in June of 2021. Governor Hochul has never been endowed with any such powers. Even if she were, emergency authorization of medical devices still requires informed consent. Mandates and directives are not law. The governor, the Department of Health, the New York State Education Department, an entity of the Board of Regents, USNY Corporation, are not legislative bodies and do not pass law. Sanitary Code 10 NYCRR 2.60 was amended in a curious and arbitrary manner. At no time did the school district provide the community with independent metrics or data on the efficiency of mask wearing, nor the harm created by extended mask wearing, especially of minors. The Centers of Disease Control and Prevention on Friday, January 14th of 2022, clarified its state stance on various kinds of masks, acknowledging that the cloth masks frequently worn by Americans do not offer as much protection as surgical masks or respirators. In addition, the FDA and CDC publicly announced to discontinue the PCR test as a metric. On January 24th, the New York State Supreme Court found masking to be unconstitutional. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the Islip Board of Education continues to enforce authoritative and harmful practices, inducing mental, physical, and emotional harm on the student body, families, and taxpayers. Let it be known that your failures to competently satisfy professional duties as prescribed by law constitute a breach of oath and failure performance of duties. You are hereby served with a notice of intent upon your bond if you do not immediately halt all enforcement of custom policies requiring masking of students and teachers, end all current and future vaccine clinics, as well as propaganda on vaccine efficiency for an emergency drug with no substantial data, and requirement of COVID tests to partake in school functions or to access the school building, renegotiate the contract with the state, ARP, the ESSER funds, or return the funds, and immediately amend the reopening plan. Now, since the district clerk is not here, I want it on record that I have my intent, so who would like to have this?
I'll take it on behalf of the board.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the public for the Board of Education? Okay. All right, since there's no other questions, we're going to move on to our reports.
Thomas.
Oh,
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Thomas, 57 Catherine's Drive. This is on a different matter altogether. This is on the proposed curriculum changes that are going to occur. I will say straight out that for the most part, you know, I really do see the value in the changes that are going on. I do have two very specific concerns. And they are very specific to the changes at the high school, and more specifically within social studies. The two areas, first, because the elimination of the honors program with the current 9th grade, they will have two choices. And the choice is AP Euro, which I think hands down is probably the most rigorous of the AP courses that are offered, hands down. And I know the College Board does allow for a 10th grade AP Euro as long as there has been preparation in 9th grade for an AP course, which these kids aren't going to have. Understanding there is no honors option, and after a conversation with the social studies director, I just want to ensure that for those students, for that particular transition, where the preparation isn't there, that when that master schedule is being constructed, that there is a real effort to put a Regents class opposite those AP classes for those students who are trying, but then are failing to be able to meet that rigor, that they will not have a complete schedule change. That's the first area of concern, and I think that, from what I've heard, seems to be taken care of. My second major concern, however, is the ultimate plan, if it is still the current plan, to put AP Euro in the 9th grade. Again, in 2 years. In 2 years, looking at the flowcharts, AP Euro is in 9th grade, 10th grade would be AP World. Hands down, any social studies teacher, any student who has taken AP Euro will tell you it is not appropriate at the 9th grade level. The kids are just not there yet. And even the College Board, if you go to the website, they will say the most appropriate places for AP courses would be 11th and 12th grade. 10th grade, with adequate prep, it can be done, especially AP World and AP Euro. 9th grade, however, the College Board, as well as on their website, does recommend that in the 9th grade year, that preparation be done to handle those more rigorous courses. In addition, they mentioned that admissions officers into colleges agree with that stance. So I am very concerned. My child is not going to go through that in ninth grade. But for students who are coming up through this district from the middle school into the high school, that ninth grade AP Euro decision, if that is standing, I think is really adding a burden that they are just not capable of. Cognitively, they're not there yet. And instead, it should be a preparation year for AP World, or if AP is the direction that is being insisted upon, there are other AP courses. Human geography is less rigorous. You can't take your most rigorous AP program and place it on the ninth grade on a 14-year-old. And I am asking that the district reconsider that particular plan, as I think it puts an undue burden on our children.
I can respond to that. Ms. Thomas, thank you for those comments. I can say to you that regarding your first concern, I'm not in a position where I could promise that that will happen across the board, that we would have an AP course at the same period as a Regents course. But I can tell you, when there's fewer choices, it makes that much more likely that that would happen. So we're planning on doing that, and we think it will happen, but I will know as the master schedule gets developed. So that's our plan for that first piece. Regarding your second comment, we've had discussions about human geography in that grade, and the AP Euro is not a definite for grade 9 in the future.
Yeah, I do hope that goes away. And the only one thing with the master schedule, I mean, there are priorities in the master schedule for these children that are making and they're going to attempt it, that be a priority in that creation of that master schedule, so that those classes are opposite, so they don't have a total.
I can say to you, I think it's very likely. I just cannot tonight say with 100% certainty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. Are there any other questions for the board? Okay. All right, we're going to move on to our reports and correspondence. Cybersecurity, Bedwell.
I was unable to attend.
Oh, I didn't think we went. That's why I saw it on there, and I thought you attended the virtual. All right, you want to talk about the virtual con? It would have been tonight as well.
The Capitol Conference? That was last week.
Okay.
So on Wednesday, February 2nd, I participated in the annual NISBA Virtual Capitol Conference. This is a webinar which began with a conversation between Bob Schneider, who's the Executive Director of NISBA, and the State Education Commissioner, Dr. Betty Rosa. Some of the topics that were discussed included the DEI initiatives of SED, an expansion of UPK, the importance of teacher recruitment efforts, the foundation aid increase and formula, the importance of career and technical education programs as well. Following that conversation, the governmental relations staff of NISBA reviewed the governor's executive budget proposal and the $31 billion that is being allocated for school aid this year. Lastly, there was a presentation by Daniel Fuller, who is the Deputy Secretary of Education for the governor. And then there was a legislative panel with state senators Shelley Mayer and John Liu, who are heads of their respective educational committees, about the educational priorities for this upcoming legislative session. And the webinar ended with the NISBA government relations staff just providing tips and suggestions to school board members for their district advocacy meetings. And that was it.
Okay, great. And then the Longwood Legislative?
Sure. So I had participated in that as well, and I know that a number of other district staff and community members also participated in that too. So this took place on Saturday, February 5th. This was the 18th annual workshop, but this was the second year that it was virtual. There was a review of the state budget executive proposal, as Mrs. Brower had shared, as well as some legislative priorities from, again, the NISBA director, Mr. Bob Schneider. He had outlined the proposed aid increases and NISBA's priorities legislatively for seeking amendments to the foundation aid formula, the importance of universal free school meals, addressing the unintended consequences of the tax levy legislation, expanding broadband access, and other initiatives. Afterwards, there was a presentation by Dr. Julie Lutz of Eastern Suffolk BOCES entitled Reshaping the Future of Public Education. This presentation included information and data on Suffolk County's decreasing student enrollment data, as well as increases in students that identify as students that receive free reduced price lunches, ELL students, students with varying needs, and other information. There was also information that was shared about the school budget planning and the achievement gaps that have taken place over the course of these past 2 years. But really, the webinar centered on the Long Island State Delegation taking prearranged questions from attendees, which included students, school staff, and school board members. Unfortunately, the Islip School District was not provided with the opportunity to ask a question this year, as we have in the past. But the state's, the district's state legislative representative that was there was our state assemblyman, Garrett Gandolfo. And then some of the topics discussed included, again, the free meals, the unrestricted fund balance limitations, APPR, the state budget, the location of polling sites other than school districts, and other initiatives that are taking place at the state level this year.
Thank you,
I was also at it, I'd like to put the others. There is a bill in the assembly, A 8487, seeking to return local control. They want to get a set of metrics to have a definitive answer on masks are coming off. They want a 90-day mandate. When there's a 90-day mandate, then the legislature needs to take action by law. They discussed the vaccine mandate. All the legislators that were there were against it. They said it cannot be mandated, has to be, there has been no talk about it or support for it. The fund balance they wanted to see about it getting increased. They wanted to instruct BOCES instructor caps to entice quality instructors. There was a topic, politics in school. All the legislators that spoke on it said they need to educate students. Parents want education, not indoctrination. Polling places in schools. They said you may have to look for other options, but sometimes schools are needed. APPR exemptions, there's no conversation on it yet, but the consensus was they're in favor of it. And federal funding, they said to be aware when the funds run out, or you're going to be creating recurring expenses that the taxpayer is going to have to now foot the bill. That's what I got out of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Arston. PTA updates?
Wait, I'm sorry, wait, that was the same as that, you were reporting on the same meeting, correct?
Yes,
Okay, thank you, I was just, I don't know, thank you.
it was a Zoom meeting.
Okay.
Went from, what was it, 8:30 to
Like noon,
9 till that.
yeah, 9 to noon,
May I
12:30.
ask a question, Mr. Austin?
Sure.
I know you said about the mask mandate and we want the metrics to see when it's gonna stop.
That's in the bill.
Yes, and you said that it's 90 days. But since Governor Hochul, maybe our attorney can say this, I'm not sure, but since Governor Hochul legally put this mandate in place, why is Iceland waiting 90 days for the legislator when the governor, I know
The 90
maybe you
days is
can't
not
answer
for us.
that,
The 90
but
days,
maybe.
the 90 days was for the legislature. When the 90 days is up, they can't extend it again. The
I
legislature has
understand
to
that,
enact.
but there was a Nassau Supreme Court justice that already said it's unconstitutional. So maybe our
And then there was a
attorney,
stay, and it's in the court now. It went up to a higher court,
So
No,
state overrule ruling of the judge of unconstitutionality.
a higher court.
The appellate court, it's.
Yeah, I understand.
no,
what
yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying the Supreme Court justice ruled there's been no hearing. And now there's a stay overruling the ruling. That's where we're confused, yeah.
Yeah,
That's,
And
well,
our
that's more of a
attorney-
legal. I understand what you were saying.
yeah, no, I'm
We're gonna
not
let
trying to
them-
be argumentative,
No,
I'm
we're gonna let
trying to
the-
understand
Mr.
where our
McGowan,
tax
speak.
dollars
It's
are
nice to
going.
understand.
To an attorney's office that has been telling, I mean, you guys handle the majority of the school districts. You guys been saying the same thing all along. When in fact, a lot of us, I know, have voiced our concerns that this wasn't done in a legal manner. She didn't give 60 days notice to us, but yet my tax dollars are towards your salary, and you're giving bad advice. You're telling them to follow something illegal. So why, I mean, well, number one, I guess I could ask this too. Board of Ed, are you thinking about going with another law firm? Because this law firm is telling you to follow an illegal mandate law, whatever requirement, whatever you want to say. So why is it now we have to wait 90 days when a Supreme Court justice already said that it's unconstitutional?
Mr. Austin's talking about, there's no law on 90 days. Mr. Austin, I believe, is talking about some piece of legislation that legislators are talking about in the legislative breakfast.
So
There's no rule of law that right now talking about 90 days, there's nothing. So what you're raising up is, as of now, there's an appellate court who's reviewing the Supreme Court's decision, which determined that the regulation, there was illegality in the regulation,
Yes.
illegality in its creation. As we all know, the courts are our third branch of government. Part of their duties and responsibilities is to make determinations as to the constitutionality of government action, right? And the government took an action. There was a question as to the legality of it. A lower court made a determination. It's moved up to the appellate court because the state, from the executive branch, that's where the rule came from, the executive branch has appealed that lower court decision as to the constitutionality of it. The appellate court now has it in its hands and has issued a stay saying that, and again, that's the third branch of government saying this regulation will stay in place until we make a final determination as to whether we agree or disagree with the lower court's determination. So that's where it stands now. Yeah.
I'm on board with you. My question is that why were you advising, not you personally, but your law firm that you're part of, why were you all advising majority of the school districts on Long Island to follow something that Holtsville did not use the three branches of government? It was a requirement or it was a recommendation. It wasn't a law. So why is Ingram spreading this all through Long Island when this is creating so much division between people, families, coworkers, whatever? It wasn't a law.
I disagree with the premise that we're creating division or anything.
No, I didn't mean, just saying,
Yeah, no, I
this is
understand.
what you're I don't want to say spewing, but this is what you're telling your clients,
Quite all right.
right?
But-
I just don't understand. She didn't take the legal steps. So
And
why is the attorneys not bringing this up to the
state-
Board of Ed and the superintendent?
the state creates a regulation. The court's gonna review that regulation. Until that court says that regulation is unconstitutional, and now you have a court that said it's unconstitutional, now you have another court that says, I'm gonna put a stay there, that stay doesn't mean it is or it isn't.
But
But
why?
until,
Let him finish.
until that regulation is determined to be unconstitutional by a competent court, a court of competent jurisdiction in this state, which is now moved to the appellate court, until that happens, state agencies, whether they're school districts, other state agencies that have to enforce the mask mandate, or other regulations that are put in place, those must be followed, or you reap the possible repercussions of having the state come in and say, I'm gonna take over your school board, I'm gonna get rid of your superintendent. And as you saw, this is taking quite some time. And the options would be, I'm gonna lose state aid, I'm gonna have the state running my school board until the court makes a determination, which could be 6 months, a year.
No, I totally
So
get that. My
think
question
that
is,
our
before
advice to
the,
the clients always is, and I can't give you the advice I give them because it's attorney-client privilege, but in general, our advice to the clients are, we want to put them in the best position that they can protect the institution of the school district from the most amount of harm.
so your best position from your law firm, just
Protect the
confirm
school.
this, was not to, I don't know, I'm not trying to be rude, but
Protect the institution.
to
In the
protect
meantime,
the
all the
institution, but
courts
not
do
follow
is-
the
See,
law.
And our kids
no,
are stuck in the
I'm
mouth.
sorry, folks, this is why I
I'm
talked
just
about our
trying to
board
get
policy.
clarification, 'cause why were you advising them this? And I'm no lawyer, but why were you advising them this prior to the Nassau County Supreme Court Justice
thank you. All right, right now, we're in reports, we're not in public. So, PTA updates?
All right, so for PTA updates for this week, Wing has a night out at McDonald's on March 16th, and a portion of all sales between 5 and 7 p.m. are going to be donated to the PTA. Their next meeting for Wing PTA is March 28th at the Iceland Public Library at 7 p.m. If you didn't have an opportunity to attend the one with Press and Sherwood, I really encourage you to do so. The library has so many resources. For Comac Road, their Blue Jeans Fall reboot has been scheduled at Timber Point Country Club on April 28th. They're looking for donations of prizes and raffles. They also need lots of volunteers. At Sherwood, their spring book fair is March 8th and 9th with a family event at night on the 9th from 4:30 to 7. Their talent show is scheduled for March 18th. Their next meeting is March 29th, where they're going to be inviting and welcoming all incoming second grade parents to attend. SEPTA had their Dang Barbecue fundraiser last night. They're hosting a virtual workshop with Randy Young discussing transitions within special education programs. Kate, is that, Dr. Kelly, is that tomorrow?
That's tomorrow evening.
The middle school's next meeting is March 14th. Pre-sale for yearbooks is ongoing till March 25th. And the high school is celebrating PSI Love You Day this Friday. The PTA is going to be putting positive notes on all of the lockers and handing out candy during lunch periods. And the fashion show is scheduled for April 7th. Did you want to talk about post-prom?
I always want to talk about
Okay.
I met February 2nd with the senior class, great bunch of kids, and they had 4 options that they put forward that they were voting on. And I was notified Monday that the theme for this year will be glow in the dark. So anybody wants to jump in and help, we're always looking for helpers.
Thank you, Mr. Austin, and thank you for all you do at post-prom.
I love it.
It's a very big undertaking, and it's something that we should be very proud of that we offer to our high school seniors. You know, I talk to other people in other districts, and I tell them, you know, what we do here at Islip, and they're really wowed by it. So, but thank you for what you do and all the people that help out to
Yeah,
that.
great
The community, everyone that contributes to that. It's a real nice alternative to keep all the students safe, and that's what it's all about. Okay, I'm going to move on to dates to remember. We're going to have winter recess, which will be February 21st to the 25th. Our next Board of Ed meeting will be on March 8th with our second budget workshop. Meeting will be here in the high school auditorium beginning at 7:30. We're going to open up at 6 o'clock for exec session. You need a motion to move from open to executive for the purpose of personnel. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Okay, that was Mr. Colleen and Mrs. Flora. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, folks, for coming to our board meeting. Have a safe night.